So, Lori, nice to see you again. I'm so glad you're back on the show.
Lovely to see you again, and thank you for having me back.
Yeah. So I don't know who's listened to all the episodes. Let's assume people are hearing you for the first time. You wrote the book in 2017 that talked about the orgasm gap. And I
Yes,
guess I'd love to start with what led you to write the book. What sort of created that project? And maybe you could define orgasm gap for people.
sure. So I teach the psychology of human sexuality at the University of Florida to hundreds of students a year. And when I taught them about both the orgasm gap and female pleasure and anatomy, there was an uproar in my class, and I'll come back and talk about the orgasm gap well, I won't come back. I'll define it right now and then describe the uproar.
Yeah.
Um, so the orgasm gap is the consistent finding in the research literature that when cisgender women, so women identified as female at birth, still identifying as a woman, get it on with cisgender men, the women are having way fewer orgasms than the men. And while that's true in all types of sex, it's largest in hookups, gets smaller with subsequent hookups, friends with benefits, but rarely, if ever, closes altogether.
Hmm.
And a big reason for that is that women are not getting the external genital clitoral stimulation they need. So go back to 2016. I teach all this in my class. This is a 3-hour class. So
Right.
usually 3 to 6 p.m. So usually the students are like ready to get out and get dinner. But when I taught about female orgasm, about 30 women stayed after class for an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, saying that they no longer felt broken, that they had never orgasmed from penetration. This was the first they heard of the clitoris. And I was blown away.
Wow. Yeah.
What happened to this knowledge that I grew up with, that I knew about? And we know that knowledge of female anatomy comes and goes over history, but the passion with this that they felt was so intense that I started really revising my course to really teach to female orgasm. And I got notes from women, thanks to you, I no longer feel broken. Thanks to your course, I had my first orgasm. Notes from men, I now am able to reliably, facilitate my girlfriend's orgasm. And I thought, whoa, if it can't just be the students at the University of Florida who don't know this.
Right.
And so that was Becoming Cliterate was born.
Okay. I'm a little surprised that the guys weren't staying after class too. Yeah, I mean, you'd think it'd be like, please sign me up, but interesting. I'm struck by how often I have to tell clients in my sex therapy practice. I have to explain to them that most women don't orgasm from penetrative sex and that they need this other stimulation. How many people have felt broken, male and female, right? Like I can't have an orgasm, or I can't, my partner won't, or it's really amazing the lack of understanding about this.
Yeah. And I started thinking a lot about why, because it's, I mean, our anatomy has been around for a very long time, right? But if you look at the culture at large, it becomes so obvious why. Mainstream movies, porn, showing women having fast and fabulous and orgasms from intercourse. Even the language we use the word sex and intercourse as if they're one and the same.
Right. Right.
Foreplay, just to lead up to this big main event.
Right.
And then you couple that with lack of sex education. And it's no wonder, right, that there's so many women who don't know, who feel broken.
So
Yeah.
will you talk a little bit about like what are the statistics around I mean, I guess what's the research about this? What are the statistics about what percentage of women can orgasm from penetrative sex, or what we understand about how that
Yeah.
works?
Thank you for asking. One of my favorite stats to spew. So thank so in originally Share Height from the Height Report, which by the way, if y'all haven't seen it, there's a great new movie out about her called The Disappearance of Share Height.
Oh,
You can find it on Amazon, I believe. And anyway, she was like the first in the 70s to say, women don't orgasm from penetration. And she came up with the stat that only 25% of women do. However, she didn't ask the women, are you also getting your clitoris stimulated?
Ah, right.
So then some other researchers came along and they said, can you orgasm from thrusting alone? And somewhere between 15 and 18% of women said yes. But I got to thinking, it's so something that so many women want to do that if it happened once, they might say yes. So
Ah,
I started asking a different question that didn't have orgasm in the question, wasn't leading that as the ideal. I started asking women, what's your most reliable route to orgasm? And the answers are, I don't know orgasm, clitoral stimulation alone, penetration alone, clitoral stimulation coupled with penetration. I've been asking this question since about 2016 to all of my students when I give talks publicly. I even give this question when I do trainings for physicians and other mental health professionals. 0 to 4%. Zero
say
or
penetration alone.
say penetration alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I share this with basically every client I see because I can't count on them knowing this,
Yes,
and I'd say
exactly.
half of them are surprised, probably, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Me too. And and the men are surprised, the women are surprised, the women are relieved, the men are a little taken aback.
I also can't tell you how many times I've had the guy, I mean, I'm talking about heterosexual couples here, where the guy will say, well, every other partner I've ever had has come this way. And I'm like, statistics do not back that up. Like, I don't know what the data is about faking it or just assuming your partner's had an orgasm, but
Well, I don't know about any data about assuming, but the data on faking is 70%
wow. Yeah.
have done this at least once. Some do it consistently through their whole sexual history.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So
What?
when you're thinking about the reasons for the gap, I mean, there's this lack of knowledge, first of all, I
Right.
suppose, right? And then I
Absolutely.
suppose if your partner's faking, you don't understand that there's this gap too. But like, what else goes into this gap?
Yeah. So you're right. Lack of knowledge, faking, and you're teaching your partner exactly what not to do.
Right.
But there's so much else, right? Um, there's lots of reasons that it's like there's reasons why aren't women getting the clitoral stimulation they need. So and then there's other. So underlying that is these media images, this overvaluing of male sexual pleasure in the culture, in the media. There's women being socialized, and Peggy Ornstein found this a lot in her interviews with girls in her book, Girls and Sex. Women being socialized to feel like if it's good for him, it's good for me, that my
Mm,
satisfaction comes from him. Also, women being socialized to not be assertive about their pleasure um, because it's pushy to ask for the clitoral stimulation you need. And men don't need to ask for the stimulation they need, it's part of the encounter.
right.
Also, then there's some individual things that can get in the way of orgasm that might be driving the orgasm gap, right? Women's body image monitoring, like, do I look okay? Do I smell okay? Which is related to thinking more how you appear to others than how you feel yourself. Lack of mindfulness and embodiment because of those thoughts. For younger women, there's slut shaming,
Mm,
and it's very hard to enjoy sex you're fearful being called a slut for. And sadly, even more sadly, for a lot of women, is sexual pain. That a
mhm.
lot of women are experiencing sexual pain. Debbie Herbenek has found 30% of women are experiencing this. And certainly, if you're experiencing pain and not stopping the encounter, not looking for solutions for that, you're not going to orgasm.
Yeah.
So, and then younger women, the final thing I'll say, and also from Debbie Herbenek's research, and my students back this up because I do this polling with my class, is sex is a scary thing for young women. A lot of non-consensual choking, hair pulling, scary things happening. And certainly if you don't feel safe,
Right.
you're not going to orgasm.
Yeah. I mean, I've also encountered plenty of women who historically have not masturbated, haven't explored their own pleasure. Like there's a disconnect. So they don't even know what to advocate for, right? Like that's baked into this, I would imagine too.
Yes, that's such a good point. We don't teach young girls, we don't mention masturbation, so a lot don't. And then here's an interesting statistic, again from Share Height, but I've backed it up with my polls, is less than 2% of women masturbate exclusively by putting something in their vagina.
Right.
Makes sense,
Yes,
right?
it does.
So
The statistics line up there.
yeah. So, but even women who masturbate, there's like this disconnect between what I do alone and how I'm supposed to get pleasure with a partner.
Yeah, as if they'd be totally unrelated, right? Like, yeah,
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm also thinking, I mean, I don't run into this all the time, but it certainly comes up that women can feel like their genitals are gross, smell bad, they're icky, they don't, they can't imagine somebody going down on them or even touch it. I mean, that's heartbreaking to me, the sort of rejection of our own
Oh,
physical being.
it is heartbreaking to me too. So many women find their genitals gross, disgusting, smelly. And the culture helps us feel that way, right?
Right,
Like all these scented things we're supposed to use, which are very bad for vaginal health,
right.
that imply we're dirty and smelly.
Yeah.
And then the young women, inner lips are not supposed to be even and petite. One sticks out around the other.
Right, right.
But young women are being told there's memes on the internet comparing women's genitals to roast beef sandwiches. And
I
these
have
women,
I should for
it's
those not
terrible.
watching, I just like reacted in
Yeah.
horror. I have not seen those.
Yeah. And young women being told that a big inner lip means you've had too much sex, you're a slut.
Uh,
So there's just so much, like the whole culture almost sort of, it's baked into the culture for women not to have pleasure.
right, right. So this huge barrier exists. It's complicated, like a whole brick wall of different bricks, right, that are
Oh,
blocking
that's such a
pleasure,
great metaphor. I love
blocking women from their pleasure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
And I don't know, in your research, have you asked, I don't know if this has come up, like in your questions or in just your interactions with students, but I often find that a male client, I see only couples, but again, in a hetero couple, the guy often actually really cares about their partner's pleasure. They also would really like their partner to enjoy this. They have been wanting this. Sometimes they feel broken or inadequate, but it's not often I find somebody who really doesn't give a darn. It's just, as long as I get off, it's good.
Right. What I tend to say to my students, most men care about your pleasure. If you find one who doesn't, run.
Exactly.
But most men care so much. And in fact, the research backs that up. But they have been misguided
Yeah.
about what they need to do to provide pleasure. I have a client, a couple I'm seeing now, they're in their 50s. It's a third marriage. This woman, my woman client, is the first person who's told her partner, he's had two other wives,
Right.
and neither have told him. And he cares a lot. He's
Yeah.
eager to learn now, and that
Right.
that is what I find quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I also find an awful lot of people come in, both male and female, with this idea that somehow the guy's just supposed to know. I mean, like one of the things I talk to clients about is I believe we're each responsible for our own pleasure and we have to equip our partner with that knowledge. So I think these guys who care so much maybe have felt like I'm supposed to know and I don't, then I just feel bad, as opposed to
yeah.
wait, I need to elicit the information from my partner.
Yeah, I
So,
agree. I tell people you are responsible for your own orgasm. And along those lines, I also tell my female clients it is no less sex if you touch yourself
right.
with a vibrator, with your hands before, after, during intercourse. because every woman's genitals are different, right? You know that. And we also know what you need any specific moment. It shifts. And it doesn't mean you're not having sex with a partner if you're engaging with yourself.
Right. Right. I want to come back to that in just a second. I want to make sure to ask what has changed since 2017 about this, because I don't know if you're going to do a second edition, but that's been 7 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do a second edition, but I do have another book planned, but I'm just not sure if I'm going to write it because
Yeah.
I get down these rabbit holes, and I'm not sure I want to do that.
Okay.
But
So I won't ask you, so you don't feel committed.
yes, no, but a lot has changed and a lot hasn't changed.
Okay.
What has changed is more women know about the clitoris and the orgasm gap. In 2016, when I got the idea for the book, at the end of the class, I asked people, what's the most surprising thing you learned? And I'd say 90% said the clitoris, and they weren't aware of the orgasm gap.
Okay.
Now these students are coming in, they've heard about the clitoris and they've heard about the orgasm gap, but they haven't figured out how to apply it to their own life. It's like
Okay.
the knowledge is now there, which is a wonderful step, but there hasn't been anybody telling them how to apply this knowledge or empowering them to apply this knowledge. So the gap, I'm finding it's getting a little smaller, but not enough. And a lot of women will say, yeah, I have my students write these reflections after each class, and uniformly I hear, like, I knew about this, but I didn't really understand how to apply it to my life.
Gotcha. All right, so let's talk a little bit about vibrators
I was
yeah,
just
and
going to
and
say,
other strategies to close this gap.
the other thing that has improved, I think, is more women using vibrators during solo sex. That has been, and we know vibrators had a 600% increase in sales during the pandemic.
I did not know that.
Yeah, which is fabulous. So, but a lot of them aren't moving it into partner sex. So yes,
Okay.
please, vibrators are one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've heard all kinds of things about this with couples, right? Like they feel ashamed either of needing it or they are afraid their partner either feels threatened by it or the woman feels like their partner might be threatened by it. Like I keep trying to tell people this is just an aid to pleasure. There's no body part that moves like that, right? There's no
Right.
no shame in needing that kind of stimulation, right?
I have a metaphor I use to
Okay.
help with this. Well, first of all, I like to educate people that we have special receptors for vibration on our vulvas and on penises. So that it explains why we love this feeling, and so do penises, in fact.
Okay.
But the metaphor that I often use is if you were in the swimming pool and there was a raft and you were floating on the raft, off the rafts, kissing, hugging, enjoying the day, you wouldn't go home and call your friend and go, oh, me and my raft had the best day. Oh, and my boyfriend was there, or my husband was there.
Uh
You wouldn't even mention the raft. It was just a tool
yeah.
to enhance the experience. And the same is true of vibrators.
Yeah. Is there research about I don't know how many women sort of need a vibrator to reach an orgasm?
I don't know about the research on that, but I do know the research that a lot of women don't have an orgasm till they use one. Over 50% use one alone, less with partners. And speaking of research, I literally just did a literature review on all the studies on vibrators, and I found a fascinating one that
Okay.
I'd love to share that I never had seen before. It was an intervention with men. They were instructed to use a vibrator twice a week with their female partner. And then they were interviewed, and the men all said the same thing. It enhanced their pleasure for three reasons. First, they caught what I call vicarious vibes. Like they caught the vibrator stimulated their penis. They loved it. Two, the novelty was exciting. Three, their partners were more excited, so they were excited. And this was the surprising part. It enhanced intimacy, they said, which
Mm.
makes sense because you have to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, right. So instead of being this mechanical barrier between the two people, it's really going to open up
Yeah,
that connection.
yeah. So I think it's, I mean, and there's so much scientific support. There's articles in medical journals now calling vibrators empirically supported devices
Right.
for sexual pleasure.
Now, I usually recommend to clients, at least to start with, that it's the woman who's driving the vibrator. Again, not to just think, oh, you can hand this thing to the guy and he's going to know where to put it or how to use it, right? It's only the woman in the body who knows, like,
Exactly.
how firm should this be, or where should it be, or should it be moving, or whatever. So you agree with
Exactly.
that? Yeah.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I think the woman should be driving it, for sure.
Okay. So I want to ask you about closing the gap, but before I do, I mean, I'm also sitting here thinking, I'm what I say to clients is I like people to be able to have the option of having an orgasm if they want one, but I'm also sometimes trying to talk them out of such a goal of driving towards an orgasm, right? Like any sort of goal orientation can create pressure. And so, even in this question of closing the gap, do you think the number should be exactly equal, or how do you even think about
No, and
what
I
we're
think that's
aspiring
the
for?
greatest irony of all that I faced when writing Becoming Cliterate is it was this book to close the gap, empower women to orgasm, but I didn't want to put pressure on women to orgasm. So I think of it this way. I think of it both culturally and individually. And when I think of it culturally, when we know there's such a statistically significant gap, then we know we've got a cultural problem to solve. But in terms of individual bedrooms, like I'm sure, like you, my goal is to give the women the knowledge, the skills, the confidence, the empowerment to orgasm, but also tell them that doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to orgasm every time, and neither does he.
Right.
The
Right.
best sex is when you're not goal oriented.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
other irony that I often talk to clients about is that ironically, too, the best sex is when there are moments in the encounter where you are not even barely aware of your partner, where you are in yourself. People
Mm.
don't really understand that yes, there's the connection before, hopefully the connection after, but during the orgasmic experience, you're not aware. You should be in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything you want to say? I mean, women stayed after class, right? And have been eager to learn this. And certainly it benefits women to be able to be empowered, be able to have an orgasm. But anything else you want to say about the benefits for men?
I think, yeah. And I know Ian Kerner talks a lot about this in his book, She Comes First, which, by the way, that was the first place that the word clitorate appeared. It's on his back book cover in
Oh,
2004. I asked him, I love this word. Can I use it?
I didn't realize that. I thought that was your word. So,
No,
yeah. Okay.
people, and he said, yes, the more clitorate people, the better. Um,
Right.
and so the benefit to men is it takes the pressure off of them to give an orgasm by lasting long and
Yeah.
thrusting hard. And if they understand women's pleasure, they can adopt a turn taking methodology or strategy where the focus is on her. She can orgasm with clitoral stimulation. And then when it's your turn, you don't have to worry about anything but your own enjoyment.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I guess I would highlight that it's not like guys should know exactly how to stimulate the clitoris or whatever.
Right.
I mean, work with your individual partner about what they want in this specific moment, right?
Exactly. And a lot of people say, oh, lesbian sex doesn't have this problem. And they say it's because women who have a clitoris know what to do, but that's not true
Yeah,
because everybody's different. The reason is when women have sex with women, we know they communicate more, they take more time, and they adopt a turn taking strategy.
right, right. So how can people, find your book or reach out and connect with you?
So the best way to find me is my website, www.drlauriemintz, DRLAURIEMINTZ.com. And from there, you can find my social media, but all my social media has the same handle, Dr. Laurie Mintz. I'm most active on Instagram. And you can find links to buy my books on my website, on my link tree in Instagram, or just go on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or anywhere where books are sold.
Great. Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me on. And I think your clients are quite lucky that they have you. So we just keep spreading the word.